Shalom, coming back with another lesson. Before I begin this lesson, I'd like to begin by giving all honor, glory, and praises unto Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashim, Racha Kodash. I'm going to give double honors to the elders and apostles and elder bishops of Great Millstone who rule well, where I've learned its truth from. I want to say peace and salutations to you, Akim, you brothers out there laboring, pushing this word out in all truth and in sincerity, presenting your bodies as a living sacrifice, which is your reasonable service. I want to say shalom to you, Akwaf, you Israelite sisters that may be listening, and also to you Israelites that are scattered across the four corners of the earth. You may look like these other nations, but your seed line goes back to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which is the chosen seed line. Shalom. So in this lesson, we're briefly going to be touching on the Edomites and everything that they've done since they've come into rulership and how they've run this planet into the ground, right? Now I'm going to start in the book of Proverbs, chapter 29. I'm going to start at verse 2, right? Because it gets straight to the point. Now it says, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice. But when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn, right? So when people are in a state of mourning right now because, beginning of March, America, along with Israel, decided that it'd be a good idea to start a war with Iran, right? So Israel started bombing Iran, and America got dragged into this battle or this war that's currently raging in the Middle East, so-called Middle East, right? In the Levant region. Now, America, you know, with their pride, thought that this was going to be a quick, easy victory, a quick win, in and out, and change the regime, and off we go. However, they didn't realize that Iran was also going to come out swinging, and at this point, Iran's holding its own. Now, America, in the hasty action of joining the war, starting a war with Iran, may not have taken into consideration that Iran had an ace up their sleeve, which is the Strait of Hormuz. Now we're starting to see how the fact that they've closed the Strait of Hormuz, how that's affecting the global economy, because these Americans, are panicking, right? They're starting to struggle. They're mourning at the fact that the prices that they used to pay is getting unbearable. People are just paying or working to pay their rent, and that's it. So they don't get to enjoy any of their labors. They just have to work, almost like they're being drawn into this involuntary slavery, right? But again, the scriptures say, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, but when the wicked beareth rule, the people mourn. So you understand, the wicked are in rulership right now. The ones that are in rulership are these Edomites, starting with the elites and these banking families, the Rothschilds, right? Now, everything that they've all the decisions that they've made are leading up to, or you can trace back to one specific pivotal point, and that's in the book of Genesis. Now, when we get into the thick of things, when you read the book of Genesis, chapter 25, this talks about the birth of Jacob and Esau, right? So if you start at verse 19, you can read down and you can read about the birth of Jacob and Esau, and how they came to be. The point I want to get is from the verse 29 on down, right? So this is the book of Genesis, chapter 25, verse 29. And this is talking about the blessing that was supposed to go to Esau, but by prophecy, it went over to Jacob, right? So we're going to read that in this scripture here. So Genesis chapter 25, verse 29 reads, and Jacob sowed pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint, right? So basically, Esau hadn't eaten anything all day, and Jacob was at home cooking, right? So Esau come back, and Jacob, he was very faint, he was very hungry, right? Verse 30 says, and Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee, with the same red pottage, for I am faint. Therefore was his name called Edom, right? So the Edomites, that's where they got their name from, right? Esau, Edom, right? The Edomites. Now, Jacob was cooking, and Esau was begging Jacob to feed him, right? Because obviously he was starving, he was hungry, right? And Jacob, obviously through prophecy did the right thing, and this is what he said. This was what his response was in verse 31. It says, and Jacob said, sell me this day thy birthright. Yeah. Verse 32 says, and Esau said, behold, I am at the point to die. What and what profit shall this birthright do to me? Right. So as you see, the birthright, which was, for Esau to have it all in the end, he's sort of saying to Jacob, like, what's this birthright going to do for me if I'm dead? Just give me the red pottage, right? Now, as we continue to read, verse 33, it says, and Jacob said, swear to me this day. And he swore unto him, and he sold his birthright unto Jacob. Now, this is where Esau made the mistake. Esau sold his birthright to Jacob for red pottage, for soup, right? It says, verse 34, and then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Now, this is where it all comes down to, because Esau selling his birthright as it was prophesied to happen, Esau made the mistake of basically giving away, the kingdom for the Edomites and giving it over to Jacob, the Israelites, right? Because when you read the story of Jacob, you understand after this point how he received the blessing from his father, and obviously, he went on to receive the blessing, and that went on to his sons, which are the 12 tribes of the children of Israel, right? Which make up the southern and northern kingdom, right? Which is your so-called blacks, so-called Hispanic, and so-called Native American indigenous. They will receive the blessing, which is the kingdom, right? So as we continue in the scriptures, like when we look at the Edomites now and everything that they're doing, all the actions and all the decisions that they're making, ultimately they want to lead us, or lead themselves, right? Should I say, they want to lead the Edomites back to that blessing, but they want to get it by their own means, right? So with the fact that they started this war in Iran, right? Now the Iran is affecting the global markets. Basically, America, the Edomites, they want to destabilize the economy. They want to crash the economy so they can introduce their own system, which is the NWO agenda, the micro CHIP, right? They want to introduce that because once they've introduced that, it's almost like they can get their blessing back the GMO way, right? And this is what Esau's aiming for, right? So when we read in the book of Obadiah, right, there's only one chapter, but we're going to read the third and fourth verse. Let me highlight these, right? It's like, yeah, right? So it says, matter of fact, I'll just start from the top, right? So this is Obadiah chapter 1, verse 1. It says, the vision of Obadiah. Thus saith the Lord, Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushai power, concerning Edom. We have heard a rumor from the Lord Yahweh, and an ambassador is sent among the heathen. Arise ye, and let us rise up against her in battle. Right? It says, behold, I have made thee small among the heathen. Thou art greatly despised. Now the Edomites, the so-called, white man, which is in rulership currently at the moment. No, and that's not to say every white person is an Edomite, but vast majority of the Edomites are the so-called white people. However, as we continue to read, it says, the pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock. Now, the pride of these Edomites, right? You could see from some of these clips that we play how prideful these people are. They believe that they've won the war, that they're going to win the war, that they're going to escape untouched, not knowing or realizing that prophecy is going to land upon them, right? Is going to thrust them through.
Iran's
right?
leadership is in no better shape. Desperate and hiding, they've gone underground, cowering. That's what rats do. We know the new so-called not-so-supreme leader is wounded and likely disfigured. He put out a statement yesterday, a weak one, actually, but there was no voice and there was no video. It was a written statement. He called for unity. Apparently killing tens of thousands of protesters is his kind of unity. Iran has plenty of cameras and plenty of voice recorders. Why a written statement? I think you know why. His father, dead. He's scared, he's injured, he's on the run, and he lacks legitimacy. It's a mess for them. Who's in charge? Iran may not even know. With every passing hour, we know, and we know they know, that the military capabilities of their evil regime are crumbling. They can barely communicate, let alone coordinate. They're confused, and we know it. Our response? We will keep pressing. We will keep pushing, keep advancing. No quarter, no mercy for our enemies. Iran has no air defenses. Iran has no air force. Iran has no navy. Their missiles, their missile launchers and drones being destroyed or shot out of the sky. Their missile volume is down 90%. Their one-way attack drones yesterday, down 95%. And as the world is seeing, they are exercising sheer desperation in the Straits of Hormuz. Something we're dealing with, we have been dealing with it, and don't need to worry about it. We're on plan to defeat, destroy, disable all of their meaningful military capabilities at a pace the world has never seen before.
Well, it's only good if you win. You know, you can only do. And we've won. Let me tell you, we've won. You know, you never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over.
So it says, the pride of thine heart hath deceived thee, thou that dwellest in the clefts of the rock, whose habitation is high, that saith in his heart, who shall bring me down to the ground? Now, in his mind, the heart is the mind, right? So the ones that say in their mind, who's going to bring down America? Basically, what they're asking, right? And it says, though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, right? The eagle is a bird of prey. It's a top, bird of prey, right? It says, though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, thou shalt, and thy, Slacky, let me read that again. It says, though thou exalt thyself as the eagle, and though thou set thy nest among the stars, thence will I bring thee down, saith the Lord Yahweh. Right? So, you have these Edomites that build these tall buildings, these tall skyscrapers, they got their massive cities, they're prideful. You can't touch America. America's the greatest nation on earth. Who's going to bring us down to the ground? We got, our nest in the stars, which is, these space stations and all this other stuff. Who's going to bring us down to the ground? And it says, thence will I bring thee down, saith the Lord. The Lord's going to bring you down. That's who's going to bring you down, right? So as we continue reading, we understand that during the time of Egypt, right, the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart. So when we read in the book of Romans, right, we can, chapter 9, I must read verse 17. It says, this is Romans 9 and 17, for the scriptures saith unto Pharaoh, even for this same purpose have I raised thee up, that I might show my power in thee, and that my name might be declared throughout all the earth. Therefore hath he mercy on whom he will have mercy, and whom he will he hardeneth. Right? So if you remember the story in the book of Exodus, the Lord hardens Pharaoh's heart, and the Pharaoh would not let the people go, would not let the Lord's people go, right? So the Lord had to show his power. Just like that is how Edom, the nation of Esau, Edom, aka America, aka Babylon, how the Lord is going to show his power again, right? So there'll be like a second Exodus, right? But it's on the Lord's time, and that'll be through the chariots for the elect, right? This is what's getting ready to happen. And why? Because these heathen, these Edomites, are vain and disgusting people, right? All right, so we're going to read in the book of Hebrews, chapter 12, verse 16, right? And it reads, lest there be any fornicator or profane person as Esau, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright. For ye know how that afterwards, when he would have inherited the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no place of repentance, though he sought it carefully with tears. So you understand Esau and all the decisions that these Edomites are doing is based on this whole point back in Genesis, when they sold their birthright for a plate of red pottage. They sold their birthright. So now they've set this plan in motion in an effort to try and gain that birthright, that blessing back, but do it their own way, right? Their own genetically modified way, right? Now we understand that Esau Edom is almost at his last end, so he's on his last hurrah. So we go and read in the book of Second Ezra, chapter 6, verse 9, right? And this again, you see how the story always goes back to Jacob and Esau, right? So this is Second Ezra chapter 6. I'll start at 7 and read down to 9. The point is in 9, but verse 7 says, "Then answered I and said, What shall be the parting asunder of the times? Or when shall be the end of the first, and the beginning of it that followeth? And he said unto me, From Abraham unto Isaac, when Jacob and Esau were born of him, Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau. For Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth." If you remember what we read in the book of Proverbs 29th chapter, when the righteous are in authority, the people rejoice, which is what this is talking about. When Jacob's in rulership, the people will rejoice at the righteous kingdom that gets established. But when Esau's in rulership, it's the end of the world. And it's not talking about the end of the world like the world's going to cease to be. It's going to blow up, or nuclear bombs going to knock off its axis and it's going to just float off into friggin' space. It's talking about how Esau's rulership is getting ready to end. For Esau's rulership is the end of the world, right? But it doesn't say that. So it reads as this: For Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth, right? So I pray that this lesson has been edifying through the spirit and power of Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushai. For I give all honor, glory, and praise to Yahweh B'Hashem Yahushai B'Hashem Rechach Kodash. I give double honors to my elders and apostles and elder bishops of Great Millstone, where I've learned this truth from. I want to say peace and salutations to the hopeful elect. I want to say shalom. It's on to the next one, Lord willing. Shalom.